So here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Kareem Mahmoud. So I'll thank Muhammad for the introduction. So I will not go further introducing myself to everyone. I hope that we are all connected on Facebook, following each other, getting a close, following and look about whatever we share every day, whatever we contribute in the ELT industry. So today we have, I can tell, two methods that look a little bit any of you, and of course you can use the chat box or raise a hand if you would like to participate. So what is a PPP framework? Any idea? What do we use it for? You may use a chat box if you need, or you might raise a hand. Okay. Great. Okay. So is it skill or systems? So you declined your first answer. You said skills, then you followed by systems. So which one we go for? Systems or skills? Yeah, well, I'll tell you that a PPP framework, as you all said in the chat box, it is an acronym stands for presentation, practice, production. It means that there is a presentation given by the teacher and there is a kind of production at the end of the lesson. So one of the misconceptions about the PPP is that it's only for systems. Well, I can tell that the scale is not 50-50. I can tell that it's still the PPP framework with some adjustments and modifications on the PPP steps and activities can be used also for skills. So especially for writing, for example, you can easily deliver a presentation on how to write, for example, an email, a kind of a presentation away from the production. When you reach the production, then you can follow the product or the process approach. So, well, then the PPP framework, is it a kind of a text-based or a context-based? What's the difference? When we use the PPP, what kind of context do we have? Only a text, or we can use, for example, audio, recording, dictogloss, perhaps? So what do you think? Good, Gada. Yes, it's a context-based. Why it is a context-based? Because we can use variety of material to set up the context. Could be a text we could analyze, could be an audio material, could be a teacher or himself or herself can do a kind of a context. For example, narrating a story or something, so that the context can be an entrance to students for the coming activities. Well, we tell that there's something called text-based approach. The text-based approach is something only linked to a text. So you work on the text. So the PPP framework working with both a text and other audio, videos, any other material that can be used for setting up the context. Great contribution. So what do we use it for? As I told, mostly we use it for teaching systems, means vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, syntax, of course, since we have our host today, syntax. So syntax, and of course, discourse. So discourse is a spoken discourse or written discourse. However, still with a little bit of the adjustment on the PPP, we can use it for skills as well. But it's not a common thing, but still you can use it for skills. So through to the point, we have here, you can tell an activity or a beginning,
I think we have lost Mr. Ahmed. Yes, he's right here again. Very good. Yeah, you are muted. Could you please unmute yourself again?
yes, sorry, I'm here. I don't know why you kicked me out.
No, I never did this. I never did this. Okay, you can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So guys, I'll give you 3 minutes. So read that quickly so that we can have a mutual ground for discussion. So I'll give you 3 minutes. Okay, great. Stop you here. We'll come back in a minute to the reading. So can you tell me what is the purpose of this task? Is it accuracy or fluency? What do you think? Can you type on the chat box? Great. Asma? Do you have any clue that it's aimed for fluency, for example? Do we have any communicative activity here? Did students, work together for discussion or anything? Yes, correct, later. But in this particular situation, we don't have any clue for productivity here. Still, we did not move to the production stage. So I will take your first half of the answer. Yes, it is correct. Accuracy. So if you give a closer look to this text, you will see here that the teacher set the context here. So it was a kind of a story, a narrative. Perhaps you can use anecdote. So up to here was the context. And then the teacher started to do a lot of elicitation to introduce the new or the target language. So the teacher moved from after the lead-in, for example, to the context, to the presentation directly. The way they have done that inductively or deductively. What do you think? I mean, direct teaching, direct input, or indirect input? What do you think? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, they elicited a lot, but eventually the teacher has given this one directly to them. Yes, of course, they said she probably leave it in the post office, and then the teacher said, listen, and then introduced the target language. So that's a quick look. We are not getting in details the PPP framework, but we're just introducing the PPP framework. So in conclusion, it's 3 stages: presentation, practice, production. So what happens in the presentation is that teacher prepares students for the presentation by doing a lead-in, for example, setting up the context, and then eventually presenting the target language and working on that as stated here. So here, the aim of the task is not fluency. It's not fluency here. It is accuracy. We don't know later on in the productive stage, will the activities prepared by the teacher will be for example, fluency or accuracy? We don't know. Maybe, for example, this sequence can be followed by a controlled practice, for example. And then in the controlled practice could be written activity or writing. Then it could be, for example, MCQs, could be filling gaps. That could be for accuracy. So the thing is, the point here is that I would like you to resort the stages the teacher followed here. Why is that? Because after we do this arrangement, we're going to compare whatever you concluded from the stages of the lesson to a new method, which we call it ESA. So that's the point. So the point is to recap, to activate your schema about what is the PPP framework, what are the stages of the lesson, and then eventually we'll take these data to compare with a new method that you may not be familiar with. So let me give you just a minute, read it so quickly, try to sort these stages with letters. For example, you tell me D, B, C, R, A, something like that. So use the chat box. I will give you a minute to provide an answer. So how many minutes? 1 minute. Yeah, very good. So let's sort them, put them in the proper order. So will we get different answers? So mostly when I present this task to my trainees, I always get different answers. So surprise me here. Let's see how many different answers can we get. Okay, so if you don't remember what is the text or the story, I would remind you that the teacher started by telling a narrative, telling a story about a lady that she visited a lot of places, and eventually she could not pay for the newspaper because she did not find the wallet. And then the teacher moved to introduce the target language by starting the elicitation from students, to extract, to elicit from them what they could say in that particular situation. And eventually, he worked to use the what we call the MPF, so the meaning, the CCQs, the pronunciation, and the form. So eventually, some sort of order of these activities, of these stages, can be like that. So we can, thank you, Rada. So scene number 3 is not in the proper order. So look at these stages in that particular order. So eventually he told an anecdote. It's not a personal anecdote, but he told something. It's a sort of narrative. Then what he did, he asked about the wallet, then elicited the target language, then use the model, then can give a kind of controlled practice, filling gaps or something, and then eventually till the fair practice. So that is the way a PPP lesson should be. You start by a lead-in, then the presentation, the practice, the production. So how that could be different from what we call ESA? So what do you think? What is an ESA method? Have you ever come across this name? ESA, engage, study, activate. So what do you think? Do you know anything about ESA? Who's the first person to speak about ESA? Well, it's Jeremy Homo, I can tell. So ESA, if you remember now, the PPP started by presentation, lead-in, presentation, then practice, then production. So the teacher presented something, then students, they practice that, and then eventually come up with the production, which they could use the target language. The ESA is a new method. I would not say it's a recent method, but it's not familiar, I think, for most of the teachers in Egypt, for example. So ESA, it's engage, study, and activate. What do I mean by engage, study, and activate? This method is designed only for a single purpose, is to enhance and reinforce communicative or communicative activity or communicative skills for students. So we use the ESA when we aim mostly at fluency. So if you remember, in the PPP, we said that, the aim at accuracy at the first place. He cared more about No, it's not. Wendy said she is probably lost it somewhere. No, he said, no, 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 no. She must have left it. She must have left it. So the teacher cared more about accuracy rather than fluency. And even in the sequence of the lesson, we could see that there was a kind of a controlled practice that aims at accuracy. But here with ESA, engaging or engage, study, and activate, this particular method is quite the opposite. It aims at fluency. So how come? How come? From where this ESA come from? ESA is a mix. It's not a new method. We cannot tell it's a full approach. It doesn't have that much of theoretical background, but it's a kind of a mix between TTT, PPP, text-based approach. What do I mean by that? In teaching systems, in teaching, for example, grammar, in teaching vocabulary, pronunciation, discourse, we normally use mostly the most famous, you can say, framework, TTT, which is test, teach, test, PPP, presentation, practice, production, or text-based approach, where you have the text and you work on the text using, for example, plenty of methods, plenty of approaches, guided discovery, self-guided discovery, task-based learning, and several things you can do. So the ESA is a mix of all of that. So how come? Let's see this, give this a close look. If you have a lesson that seems to be long, you have really long one, and it's really challenging for students, what would you do? Let's say you open the course book, you found a lesson one, it really seems challenging to students. So what would you do? Can it fit for one class, or you might need some more classes? So what do you think? You can type on the chat box. So will you go ahead and present the lesson, or you will, for example, prepare all the lesson plan for 45-minute lesson to complete the whole lesson in one class? Or will you divide this, segregate it into parts? Or what will you do? Okay, Radha. So it means that you will segregate this. Okay, so that's the point. That's the point here. When you have a kid, your son, your daughter, and even this with young learners, they don't stay still, you know, they love to move a lot. And then just imagine you have a meal and this kid should finish the meal. So what happens is that you give a piece, like a little bit of a spoon here, some fork there, you know, you start to give, you know, in chunks, little bit, you know, step by step or piece by piece, and till eventually they complete the meal. The same thing we do here with ESA. When you have a lesson that seems to be challenging and you need your aims, your objectives needs to be communicative, for example, or you're aiming at enhancing, reinforcing the fluency of your students, then you follow the ESA. So how? Let's take a closer look. Engage. What do I mean by engage? In this particular, if you remember, I told you that the ESA is a mix of TTT, PPP, and even text-based approach. So it's a mix. So that's the first version. That's the first version of ESA. ESA, when it goes equal to PPP. If you remember, we said that the PPP mostly aims at accuracy. not fluency, but here the ESA is designed to fit communicative tasks. So it fits the fluency purposes. So for example, I can start, you can consider that this engage, you can consider that to be the lead-in and the context, let's say. So in the engage, you can tell that students and teacher, for example, they look at the picture and then you start to elicit, okay, what do you think? What is that? What is used for? And all that. You do the lead-in, you set up the context. Then at this particular time, you're giving students the chance to speak more than you do. It's not teacher-fronted activity, it's a student-centered activity. So you give students the chance to express themselves, to generate ideas. You're only a facilitator, so you give them really plenty of time to speak and express themselves. Yes, the communicative approach, but which will you use the whole approach, Radwa? You will use methods that supports the communicative approach. Then what should I do after that? What I should do is the study stage. The study stage, which means I present something. I present the target language to students inductively, of course, not deductively. So you start to use plenty of things. You could use the guided discovery techniques or any other techniques that you feel comfortable with. And then eventually you give them activities that they could use and generate the ideas that they used in the beginning, plus the target language you presented to them in this activity. So in that particular part, the ESA is equal in the structure only, to the PPP, because it's engage, study, and activate. And the PPP, we have presentation, practice, production. So 3 stages, against 3 stages. But the only difference here is that the PPP aims at accuracy, but the ESA aims at fluency. So it means that all the activities I present inside the classroom should be student-centered activity. They should speak more than I do. I can facilitate, I can generate ideas with them, I can brainstorm, I can take notes, I can help them to use whatever they generate inside the classroom in the activity, eventually in the activity stage. So that's the first option of ESA. How come? The ESA, we will give you now the same activity which you had before, the anecdote, and then we will see how to apply the ESA on that. The second version, or the second shape, or the second, you can say, addition of the ESA is when the ESA is equal to TTT. Really? Test, teach, test. The ESA can be equal to that? You said it's equal to PPP. Yes, that's one version of it. The ESA is a method that you can adapt, you can amend, you can use it whenever it is necessary for you to engage students more. So it is equal also to TTT. How? I can also do the engage stage or the engagement, which is the lead-in, setting up the context, blah, blah, blah. Then I can do the activate right away. How come? If I have, for example, a job interview lesson, let's say, and I showed them a picture or a video of an HR person or a 2-person setting that seems to be in an interview, then that could be the lead-in. That could be the entrance to the task. And then I will ask them to do a kind of a task that requires fluency as an objective. For example, a role play. For example, I will start to ask them. They will start to ask each other questions. So what kind of questions do you expect to have in such interview? Perhaps the salary, perhaps the qualification, perhaps blah, 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 blah. Okay, guys. So, okay, you two. So can you work together and try to ask. So you are the interviewer and you are the interviewee. So can you ask questions to each other and let's see how things will go. Then you do the monitoring and start to take notes. What for? I take note of the language they used. I take note of the content they used so that I can use these notes on the board for the study stage. So what happened after I engaged them? I showed them the interview picture. I showed them the video, for example, and then I activate their skills of fluency. I engage them, and then they are now in the stage of activate or activation. Then I start to take the notes, and then eventually I teach them something. Okay, maybe what they have used at the language is not really accurate. The content, the type of question, the content of the questions is not really 100% relevant. So in that particular part, I will give them something. As a teacher, I will give them something. Then after that, they will use the data or my input again to do again the role play. So again, so what happened? Engagement. They have seen the interview. They have seen the video. They predicted the topic. Then they have done something like a kind of testing. That's why I'm telling that ESA could be also equal to TTT. So test, now I'm testing. In this activate stage, I'm testing their knowledge. I'm testing their knowledge. But for what purpose? Is it for accuracy or fluency? It is for fluency. I need to know what they can or what they have in their mind and how they use it, how fluent they are. Is there a problem of vocabulary, for example? Did they use proper structure? Were the statements they have used were in the proper order? So you take the notes. So they do the activity, they practice fluency. Please don't interrupt. Don't interrupt. Just listen and take notes. And then after that, you take these notes on the board, work on them, elicit more, give them some extra input from your side, and then ask them again to do the role play. So that's what we call it ESA when it is equal to TTT. So test, teach, test, engage, activate, study, activate. Yes, it is true that it's called ESA, but these letters can be changed. So we can tell in this particular situation that it is EASA. So that is the stage. Engage, activate, study, activate. So here is the lesson again. Here is a task which we had before about the situation where the teacher used the anecdote, the narrative about Elka, for example, that she went to the shopping, she lost the wallet, and okay, what should we say? She must have left it, and all that stuff. So how can we turn this PPP lesson? It is a PPP lesson, a PPP activity. So how can we turn this to ESA? What do you think? Any idea? I would love to listen from you on the chat box or raise a hand, please. So if you have this task in your course book, and it is designed, as we all know that some books are designed to meet the PPP objectives. So it is designed for a PPP implementation, you can tell. How can you adapt this one to use the ESA? How to change the purpose of this activity? Instead of accuracy, you move it and you change it to fluency. Yes, Mr. Mahmoud, please open the microphone.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Yes, Sir Kareem, I really enjoyed the introduction that you have made about the differences between the ESA and the PPP. And I think here, and I'd like to present it this way, like ESA, that I'm gonna start engaging the students and into the concept itself. I'm gonna give them like a photo, a picture. I'd also like to, I can elicit some information from them about what can they see, what can they think about what is happening for about somebody's like shopping, like buying something. So I can give them a chance to engage themselves and speak and talk together about shopping, about going to the mall, about such interesting things. Yes.
Yeah, so let me rephrase what you said. So
Yeah.
you mean you will use what we call chain story, that you will get
Yeah.
pictures of the
Yes.
same incident as if the story it is summarized in pictures, and you will
Yes.
ask them to tell the story.
Yes. 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 That's what I meant.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's what we call it chain
Chain
story.
story.
That's a very good. That's a very good option. Very good
Yes.
option. Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud.
Thank you, Mr. K.
Thank you. So, any other idea? What should we do in the second part? This one. So here, let's say from here to here. What can we do? Any idea?
Well, I like what I forgot his name that just spoke. I like what he said because I think it's very important to not put words into students' heads and the teacher to find out what they already know. And using a picture where there's a situation is very, very good because it's very cognitive. And the teacher will know what vocabulary they know and what grammar they know. But
yeah,
getting to the next step, the next step is actually, for me, would be create a problem. And is there a problem? And what would be the solution? And walk them through it step by step so that they can still collaborate with one another, because it should be collaboration all along the way. It shouldn't be the teacher just leads the learning process, and manages it, but the students need to speak with each other. They will learn vocabulary from each other. So I think, as someone just said, a picture where there's a situation, maybe there's a problem. What is the problem? What would be the solution? Because you're getting into, a simple form of problem-based learning and storytelling. And those are skills that students need to learn. And they are indirectly learning vocabulary or using vocabulary and also using grammar. So it's very practical.
Yeah, but only the chain story, it has one major problem, actually. I should tell that it really doesn't fit lower levels, because if you need to create like a long story, it will be a little bit challenging for lower levels. I'm not saying lower ages, but I'm saying lower levels. Even if
that is true. That is true. But what's wrong with telling the story in their mother language first? Because understandability is the most important thing. If they don't understand it in their mother language, how would they create language in the target language? So you got to check to see what they know in their mother language, which I am a true believer that translanguaging is an important skill. I mean, I speak 4 languages, and I think it's important that they do use their mother language at lower levels. Now, after B1, no, that's not possible. I don't allow that, just a little bit. But at lower levels, they should be able to translanguage, because it's about their mother language is their home base. And, now
instead of the mother language or the mother tongue, why don't we use the mother culture, for example?
Well,
so let's say
that's what I mean.
Let's say,
our mother culture is our mother language. Yeah. How could
no?
you separate?
Instead, I can speak still. For example, I can speak still in English, for example.
Well, you're the teacher.
Not in Arabic, for example, but still in English. But I adjust, and I adapt the story to fit the culture. So let's say
the picture should fit the culture. Yeah, the picture.
Yeah. And instead of saying this is Elka, she went shopping, in, for example, in Madrid. For example, this Hassan, she went to school yesterday here near in our neighborhood. And during that time, her mother, dropped her to the main door, and eventually she forgot the wallet seems in the car. So what happened is, and I can tell the story, that for example, the headmaster called the mother, she came back and all that. So I'm just giving them a story, which is a great choice. I'm giving them a story that fits their schema, that the processing in their mind, they cannot, still, if I'm giving them a very difficult story to understand or a situation they cannot imagine, it will be difficult for them to process or to at least realize what is required in this particular situation. If they're not familiar with the situation itself, they cannot respond. They cannot respond in a proper way.
Well,
So,
it's about images and using images to teach.
Yeah.
And if I show somebody a picture of two British people walking down by a Big Ben, and are images that are very foreign to them, they're not characters that they recognize, they can relate to. So relatability is also important to understandability, and that's.
It is a maxim. It is a maxim of this course, Ron. You remember? So the course, when you tell something, there's a maxim of relativity, relevance. Everything should be relevant. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Of course, I mean, I'm an American, and I was brought up with nothing but books telling stories of white Americans, and I know I'm American, but there was never anything about Muhammad or Mahmoud or Fatma. There was nothing like that in my books. Everybody had blonde hair with blue eyes, and I don't have blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah. Yes. That's what we call it in literature, the idea of self and other. So here is a suggestion. For example, if you still, instead of using, for example, the chain story, which is a great solution, for example, alternatively, if you don't need to come up with a new ideas or a new story, or you use a new material, at least you can amend on the sequence of the lesson. So you have the situation here, you have the story. So after the story ends, which we tell this one is the engaging stage. So here is the engaging stage. The story, I lead in, I create the lead in, I set up the context, either by an anecdote, by story, by chain story, by picture, by anything. Then after that, I activate. What should I do in activate? I can ask students to use Rally-Robin. If you're familiar with Kagan structure, or Kagan strategies, you can tell that Rally-Robin, it means that two persons together doing turn-taking. Not only one person talking and the other one is listening, but both of them, they are doing turn-taking. So they discuss what did she leave, where did she leave the wallet? It's not what, it's where. Okay, so this one is where. So where did she leave the wallet? Where? So they will justify, she left it in this shop or in that shop. Why? Because she purchased or she got this magazine from there, and so on. So they activate, they communicate together. So Rally-Robin, it means turn-taking. Me and Ron, for example, we are engaged together. So I speak, he responds. So I listen, to him while speaking, then I interrupt, and then I respond. Maybe I argue, I fight, I defend my stance, and that stuff. So from that, language will emerge. So as a teacher, I do the monitoring, I take notes, and take notes of all the language that might come. Structure, grammar, vocabulary, anything. And then you do after that the study. What is the study? What is the target language you need to teach? Is must have left. So must have left. So you need to teach them. So that comes to the study. Only I do that? No, not only this target language, but I will refer to the emergent language, the language that have come out from students. They come up with a new vocabulary. They come up with a new structure, with a new justification. So also these things I will highlight. So I activate, I do the study, and then eventually they do again the task. So I do the study. This one is a study. I can teach them in that way using the MBF. Fine. So meaning CCQs, then or meaning drilling CCQs, and then you do the form, you do the pronunciation again, you do drilling, forward chaining, back chaining, all that stuff of the drilling, you know, you do it, and then they do again, they activate, they do the role play again. So you get the same exact two persons. Don't change the people. So he had a chance to meet, to discuss this topic with his friend. So you keep the same groups so that they have the same ideas. And then later on, you start to assess, have they learned anything? Did they use the target language? Is there anything, any language, any piece of vocabulary, or any piece of grammar has emerged again? And that stuff. So by that way, you can turn a PPP designed activity into ESA, engage, activate, study, activate, the same way as TTT, but aiming at fluency. So engage, you brainstorm with them, take random sample of their ideas, you activate, mean the form group, you form you do the rally robin, round robin, you do the study, you teach them, you give them something, you give them feedback on the content, language, because you're taking notes, and then you will give them the feedback on the content. Yes, it is right. That's good. You have mentioned that point. Okay, you should have mentioned that point and that stuff. And then you do again the activate. The activate, it means they will do again the task, exactly the same task, same conditions, same everything, same members, but with one difference is that they have again the new target language which they have learned from you or emerged during the discussion with their friends. So that's the full explanation. I can tell that the engagement is, the purpose of engagement is to lead students to the topic, is to activate students' schema. For example, Mahmoud, when he said, I will do the chain story, I will just get a lot of pictures of sequence events, and I will ask them, for example, to predict or to tell the story, tell their version of the story. So that by that way, you're activating their schema. What do I mean by schema? I activate their background knowledge. They have something in their mind that looks similar to this situation. Then they will tell you the story from their point of view. So I'm engaging them. All that I'm aiming at fluency. I don't interrupt. I'm not correcting them, not correcting their slaps, their errors. I'm not doing anything. I'm just taking notes. I'm just leaving them with the fluency activity. Then I can do either activate if I'm following the TTT edition, or if I'm following the PPP, I will do the study. So the study is that when I start to highlight the target language, I need them to use a particular piece of language, particular piece of grammar, vocabulary. So I will start to teach them. I will start to highlight that the language they have come with, during their discussion, I heard a certain expression. Okay, very good. Why don't I, explain to everyone? Perhaps one of the students, he used a language that looks a little bit higher in the level of proficiency from his partner. So his partner did not understand. So I will take this in mind, and then I will highlight on the board after they finish the activity. And then eventually you do the activate, which is you do again the activity with the same conditions, the same settings, everything, but with the new target language. Eventually I give them the feedback, and this feedback is really important. Why is that? I did two feedbacks here. One feedback during the study when I was highlighting and commenting on the content, and I was commenting on the language they use. Why I did this feedback? So that I can introduce the target language I want my students to use. But the feedback I'm doing at the end, after they finished everything, that is much wider than the first one. I can comment on the errors, I can comment on the use of grammar, I can comment on the content, I can do the delayed error correction. So DAC, if they have mispronounced any word or misused any structure, then I can use and I can highlight, and I can do this through elicitation from my students. So here's the difference. The overview, you have the PPP, as I told you, 3 stages. So presentation, practice, and production. The ESA, it's also minimum 3 stages: engage, study, and activate. Some of them can be repeated. So engage can be twice, study can be twice, activate can be twice, thrice, and so on. The lesson structure, fixed with the PPP. You don't renovate. You start by a lead-in, presentation, practice, production. That's it. You don't do the production first. You don't do the practice first. No, it is in that sequence. But the lesson structure with the ESA is totally different. It can be repeated. It can be shuffled. I can start with the activate. Then I will engage them. Then I will do the study based on the task you design. So the ESA is a little bit flexible way. So that's why I told you planning a lesson with ESA is much easier than the PPP. Why is that? Because I can adapt. If you have the quality of adapting activities to be like aiming at fluency, that will be really, really beneficial to you to use the ESA. So the focus, we said that focus is accuracy. Here the focus is fluency. How? Focus is accuracy in the PPP because I give them a lot of practice, controlled, semi-controlled, and that stuff. And the ESA, I aim at fluency. Why is that? Because I aim at engaging students into conversation, listen to them, don't interrupt, don't correct, don't do anything, but rather take notes of their language and then put them again into action. Frontline, let them speak. That is the thing or the focus of the PPP. Then you have the language input. Here you present, you do the presentation, and you follow, if you're teaching system, then you follow the MPF or MFP. So the meaning, use, pronunciation, form or form pronunciation, and then appropriacy as well. But there, the language input is 2 ways. Either from the teacher during the study stage or from students. So students are proven to be a great source of information. You're not the only source. You're not the only source of information inside the class. So you can take the language that emerged or the language emergence, you note it down during the monitoring, and then you can also add this during the study. Then the activities. The activities, you have types of controlled, semi-controlled, could be freer in the PPP, but in ESA, the activity, regardless it is controlled, regardless it is semi-controlled, it must be communicative. For example, I can do a semi-controlled practice in the ESA. For example, a role play with a script. So I give them the script. So I give them the script in the hand, so they read, but still they do the role play. But the aim of the activity is communicative. It means that I don't interrupt, I don't comment on errors now. The most important thing for them is to speak. So that's the purpose. It could be the same activity, but the purpose is different. When the purpose is different, the way you implement, the way you execute the activity will be different. The feedback in the PPP, you can do what we call PACs, P-A-C. So the PACs means post-activity correction. So after every activity, you can do some kind of error correction. And eventually you will give the overall feedback at the end of the lesson. But in the ESA, we don't do that. We don't interrupt them. Whatever we give, even if we have to give a feedback, a kind of a feedback, so we have to give them a kind of a glance of strategies or anything that help them to be more communicative, to be more engaged in the activity. I don't comment on the language. I don't aim at accuracy. No way. So the PPP, you can a little bit adopt the PPP. So as I told you, the PPP is used for teaching systems, means grammar, pronunciation, discourse, and vocabulary. With some adjustment, can be used for skills as well. Like I can teach writing using the PPP. I will do the presentation on how to write an email from E to Z. And then at the production, I will ask them to do the product approach, for example. They will write and I will mark this at my home. So with little bit change, I can still use the PPP. But mostly it's used for teaching systems, means vocabulary, grammar, discourse, and pronunciation. The ESA is not like this. I can use it mostly for communicative, either skills or systems, but mostly for speaking and listening. So why speaking and listening in particular? Because in listening, students are exposed more to the target language. So when they listen, they, I will not say they acquire, I will say they learn, because there's a difference between acquisition and learning. They learn proper pronunciation, they learn connected speech features, perhaps they detect some new vocabulary you need to highlight. And in speaking, it's vice versa. So now you received all that input, now it's your turn to give the output. So it mostly fits for speaking and listening. I'm not sure you guys know more about Scott Thornberry. He got a real nice approach, Dogme ELT. I can tell that the ESA little bit is similar to the Dogme, except for that the Dogme is a student-based approach. So it means that the teacher is only in all the parts of the lesson is a facilitator. So students are engaged. So he's the one who's responsible for the engaged. Students can be in the active stage. So the teacher is responsible for that. In the study, the teacher do not give any input from his side, but rather highlight and elicit the language from them. So little bit different. So what they care about in the ESA is the fluency, but in the Dogme they care more about the emergent language. They need to prove that students can be a great source of information and language can emerge even if they don't, if the teacher did not teach that. So things you need to consider in applying the ESA. In the engage part or the engagement stage, so be careful with your pace. So you need to have in mind a certain speed for your lesson. You don't spend that much in the engage. Yes, I know it's only for fluency, so I can't take much time in the engage. No, please. We care more about the activate. So yes, spend some decent time, but don't take that much. I have seen teachers, they do icebreakers, one activity, followed by a warmer, one activity, followed by a lead-in. Can you imagine? 3 activities only at the beginning of the lesson. For what? You can do warmer and lead-in together. If it is not the first time to meet, for example, I'm meeting Ron for the first time, I could do an icebreaker. But if I'm not meeting Ron for the first time, and we will always meet, it's, you know, my students, I always meet them. So I don't do the icebreaker. I can do the warmer and lead-in in one activity. The activity could be funny and also to the point, leading students to the lesson. So this can be in one activity, warmer and lead-in together. So I care more about the activity, the activate stage. So in the study, I have to be careful about something. In the study, to keep students more engaging or more engaged, and to keep your students in the fluency mode, you can tell, they speak that much. So you have to pay attention to the inductive approach. Whatever you're going to teach to students, you teach this inductively. You don't give direct inputs. you try to listen from students. Perhaps you can use any technique of the guided discovery. Technique, I'm not saying the approach, only the technique, the way they elicit, the way they engage students and that stuff. So that will give more, that will be a plus for you because your aim is fluency, then that's great. Then that will help you achieving your aim. And eventually they activate. Inside the activate, whatever is the place of the activate. If you do the activate first or you do the activate at the end, do the monitoring, take notes, don't interrupt, please don't interrupt, take notes, let them make mistake. Let them make. There is a mistake, a slip, an error, whatever it takes. So don't interrupt, let them use the language, let them have the confidence that, okay, if I make a mistake, I don't have to worry. And then eventually, you give them the feedback at the end. And be careful of the effective participation. What do I mean of the effective participation? Me and Ron in the same activity. We're doing Raleigh Robin. So I speak, I talk, Ron is listening. He's not participating. So that's not the task achievement I look for. So both parties, me and Ron, we have to speak. We have to do the turn taking. So I have to tell something, he has to tell something. I will justify my answer, he will justify his answer. And that's stuff. So effective participation, because you might find students that they are not willing to participate. That's your mind now, your idea. You know your students. In the preparation of your lesson, in the lesson planning, you have assumptions, you have anticipation, anticipated problems, you should provide solutions. That some of your students, for example, are shy. They don't participate effectively. So what will you do? So in the grouping, you might put them in a person that's not speaking that fast, for example. You put them, if it is a girl, so put her with a girl, not with a boy, for example, and that stuff. So you might find a lot of solutions, but keep in mind that you should have effective participation. So we came to the end of our session. So I would love to listen from you if you have any further questions.